Forecasting. Forecasting is a technique that uses historical data as inputs to make informed estimates that are predictive in determining the direction of future trends. Businesses utilize forecasting to determine how to allocate their budgets or plan for anticipated expenses for an upcoming period of time. Common to all forecasts. Number 1. Forecasting techniques generally assume that the same underlying causal system that existed in the past will continue to exist in the future. Number 2. Forecasts are rarely perfect. Actual results usually differ from predicted values. Number 3. Forecasts for group items tend to be more accurate than the forecasts of individual items because forecasting errors among items in a group usually have canceling effect. Number 4. Forecast accuracy decreases as the time period covered by forecasts, the time horizon increases. Important consequences of the last point is flexible business organization. Those that can respond quickly to changes in demand require shorter forecasting horizon and hence benefit from more accurate short-range forecasts than the competitors, who are less flexible and who must therefore use longer forecast horizon. Elements of a good forecast. Number 1, the forecast should be timely. Number 2, the forecast should be accurate and the degree of accuracy should be stated. Number 3, the forecast should be reliable. It should work consistently. Number 4, the forecast should be expressed in meaningful units. Number 5, the forecast should be in writing. Number 6, the forecasting technique should be simple to understand and use. Forecasting and supply chain. In the modern supply chain, forecasting is necessary for companies that manufacture items for inventory and that are not made to order. Manufacturers will use material forecasting to ensure that they produce the level of material that satisfies their customer without producing an overcapacity situation where too much inventory is produced and remains on the shelf. Equally, the forecast must not fall short and the manufacturer might finds them without inventory to fulfill customer orders. The cost of failing to maintain an accurate forecast can be financially catastrophic. Non-statistical forecasting. Non-statistical forecasting is found in supply chain management software, where demand is forecasted based on quantities determined by the production planners. This occurs when the planner enters in subjective quantity that they believe the demand will be without and any reference to historical demand.
Step in the forecasting process. There are 6 basic steps in forecasting process. Number 1, determine the purpose of the forecast. How will it be used and when it will be needed? This step provides an indication of the level of detail required in the forecast, the amount of resources, personnel, computer, time, dollars that can be justified, and the level of accuracy necessary. Number 2, establish the time horizon. The forecast must indicate a time interval, keeping in mind that accuracy decreases as the time horizon increases. Number 3, select a forecasting technique. Number 4, obtain, clean, and analyze appropriate data. Obtaining the data can involve significant effort. Once obtained, the data may need to be cleaned to get rid of outliers and obviously incorrect data before analysis. Number 5, make the forecast. And number 6, monitor the forecast. A forecast has to be monitored to determine whether it is performing in a satisfactory manner. If it is not, re-examine the method, assumptions, validity of data, and so on. Modify as needed, and prepare a revised forecast. Forecast accuracy measures. In this section, we will calculate forecast accuracy measures such as mean absolute deviation, MAD, mean squared error, MSE, and mean absolute percentage error, MAPE. For example, the following actual demand and forecast value are given in the past 4 periods. We want to calculate MAD, MSE, and MAPE. So first, step 1, calculate the error as ET equals DT F, the difference between the actual demand and the forecast. Step 2, calculate the absolute value of the error calculated in step 1. Step 3, calculate the squared error for each period. And number 4, calculate ABS ET divided by DT times 100% for each period. Calculations for accuracy measures. MAD equals the average of what we calculate in step 2, the average of all the absolute error values. MAD equals 5 plus 6 plus 7 plus 6 divided by 4 equals 24 divided by 4 equals 6. MSE, the average of what we calculate in step 3, the average of all the squared error values. MSE is equal to 25 plus 36 plus 49 plus 36 divided by 4 is equal to 146 divided by 4 is equal to 36.5. MAPE, the average of what we calculated in step 4. MAPE equals 7.94% plus 10.17% plus 12.96% plus 9.23% divided by 440.3 divided by 4 is equal to 10.075%. Approaches to forecasting. There are two general approaches to forecasting, qualitative and quantitative. Qualitative methods consist mainly the subjective inputs, which often define precise numerical description. Quantitative methods involve either the projection of historical data or the development of associative model that attempt to utilize casual variables to make a forecast. Qualitative techniques permit inclusion of soft information in the forecasting process. These factors are often omitted or downplayed when quantitative techniques are used because they are difficult or impossible to quantify. Quantitative techniques consist mainly of analyzing objective or hard data. They usually avoid personal biases that sometimes contaminate qualitative methods. In practice, either or both approaches might be used to develop forecasts. In addition, there are a variety of forecasting techniques that are classified as judgmental, time series, or associative. Judgmental forecasts rely on analysis of subjective inputs obtained from various sources such as consumer surveys, the sales staff, managers and executives, and panels of experts. Quite frequently, these sources provide insights that are not otherwise available. Time series forecasts simply attempt to project past experience into the future. These techniques use historical data with the assumption that the future will be like the past. Some methods merely attempts to smooth out random variation in historical data. Others attempt to identify specific patterns and in the data and project or extrapolate those patterns into the future without trying to identify causes of the patterns. Associative models use equations that consist of one or more explanatory variables that can be used or predict demand. For example, demand for paint might be related to variables such as the price per gallon and the amount spent on advertising, as well as the specific characteristics of the
Forecast based on time series data. Time series forecasting occurs when you make scientific predictions based on historical time stamped data. It involves building models through historical analysis and using them to make observation and drive future strategic decision making. An important distinction in forecasting is that at the time of the work, the future outcome is completely unavailable and can only be estimated through careful analysis and evidence-based priors. What is time series forecasting?
Time series forecasting is the process of analyzing time series data using statistics and modeling to make predictions and inform strategic decision making. It's not always an exact prediction, and likelihood of forecasts can vary widely, especially when dealing with commonly fluctuating variables in time series data as well as factors outside our control. However, forecasting insight about which outcomes are more likely or less likely to occur than other potential outcomes. Often, the more comprehensive the data we have, the more accurate the forecast can be. Associative forecasting techniques. Unlike time series forecasting, associative forecasting models usually consider several variables that are related to the quantity being predicted. Once these related variables had been found, a statistical model is built and used to forecast the item of interest. For example, interest rates may be used to forecast the demand for home refinancing. There are three basic types: qualitative techniques, time series analysis and projection, and causal models. Qualitative techniques. Primarily, these are used when the data are scarce. For example, when a product is first introduced into the market, they are use human judgment and rating schemes to turn qualitative information into quantitative estimates. Number 2. Time series analysis. These are statistical techniques when used several years data for a product or product line are available and when relationships and trends are both clear and relatively stable. And last is the causal models. When historical data are available and enough, analysis has been performed to spell out explicitly the relationship between the factor to be forecast and other factors such as related businesses, economic forces, and socio-economic factors. The forecaster often constructs a causal model. Monitoring forecast error. Forecast error is a measure of forecast accuracy. There are many different ways to summarize forecast errors in order to provide meaningful information to the manager. Forecast errors can be separated into standard and relative error measures. Standard error measures typically provide error in the same units as the data. What is the purpose of monitoring forecast error? Using forecast error data for better demand predictions. Smart inventory planners will use to forecast error stats to refine their forecasting processes and improve overall forecasting accuracy. More accurate forecasts will help them improve their inventory purchasing and planning. What are the two techniques can be used to monitor forecast error? Describe two measures of forecast accuracy. Three commonly used measures for summarizing historical errors are the mean absolute deviation or MAD, the mean squared error or MSE, and the mean absolute percent error or MAPE. Choosing forecast error. The selection of a method depends on many factors: the context of the forecast, the relevance and availability of historical data, the degree of accuracy desirably, the time period to be forecast, the cost or benefit of the forecast to the company, and the time available for making the analysis.
Choosing a forecasting technique. Many different kinds of forecasting techniques are available, and no single technique works best in every situation. When selecting a technique, the manager or analyst must take a number of factors into consideration. The two most important factors are cost and accuracy. How much money is budgeted for generating the forecast? What are the possible causes of errors? And what are the benefits that might occur from an accurate forecast? Generally speaking, the higher the accuracy, the higher the cost.
so it is important to weigh cost accuracy trade-offs carefully. The best forecast is not necessarily the most accurate or the least costly. Rather, it is some combination of accuracy and cost deemed best by management. Other factors to consider in selecting a forecasting technique include the availability of historical data, the availability of computer software, and the time needed to gather and analyze data and to prepare the forecast. When gasoline prices in the United States increased in 2005 due in part to hurricane damage, makers of gas-guzzling SUVs had no historical data to predict demand for those vehicles under those conditions. Consequently, they had to resort to qualitative approaches to predict demand. The forecast horizon is important because some techniques are more suited to long-range forecasts while others work best for the short range. For example, moving averages and exponential smoothing are essentially short-range techniques since they produce forecasts for the next period. Trend equations can be used to project over much longer time periods. When using time series data, plotting the data can be very helpful in choosing an appropriate method. Several of the qualitative techniques are well suited to long-range forecasts because they do not require historical data. The Delphi method and executive opinion methods are often used for long-range planning. New products and services lack historical data, so forecasts for them must be based on subjective estimates. In many cases, experience with similar items is relevant. Table 3.4 provides a guide for selecting a forecasting method. Table 3.5 provides additional perspectives on forecasts in terms of the time horizon. In some instances, a manager might use more than one forecasting technique to obtain independent forecasts. If the different techniques produce approximately the same predictions, that would give increased confidence in the results. Disagreement among the forecasts would indicate that additional analysis may be needed. Using forecast information, a manager can take a reactive or proactive approach to a forecast. A reactive approach views forecasts as probable future demand, and a manager reacts to meet that demand. Example, adjust production rates, inventories, the workforce. Conversely, a proactive approach seeks to actively influence demand. Example, by means of advertising, pricing, or product or service changes. Generally speaking, a proactive approach requires either an explanatory model, example regression, or a subjective assessment of the influence on demand. A manager might make two forecasts, one to predict what will happen under the status quo and a second one based on a what-if approach if the results of the status quo forecast are unacceptable. Computers and forecasting. Computers play an important role in preparing forecasts based on quantitative data. Their use allows managers to develop and revise forecasts quickly and without the burden of manual computations. There is a wide range of software packages available for forecasting. The Excel templates found at the Online Learning Center are an example of a spreadsheet approach. There are templates for moving averages, exponential smoothing, linear equation, trend-adjusted exponential smoothing, and simple linear regression. Operations strategy. Forecasts are the basis for many decisions. Clearly, the more accurate an organization's forecast, the better prepared it will be to take an advantage of future opportunities and reduce potential risks. A worthwhile strategy can be to work to improve short-term forecasts. Better short-term forecasts will not only enhance profits through lower inventory levels, fewer shortage, and improved customer service levels, It also will enhance forecasting credibility throughout the organization. If short-term forecasts are inaccurate, why should other areas of the organization put faith in long-term forecasts? Also, the sense of confidence accurate short-term forecasts would allow allocating more resources to strategic and medium to longer term planning and less on short-term tactical activities. Maintaining accurate, up-to-date information on prices, demand, and other variables can have a significant impact on forecast accuracy. An organization also can do other things to improve forecasts. These do not involve searching for improved techniques but relate to the inverse relation of accuracy to the forecast horizon. Forecasts that cover shorter time frames tend to be more accurate than longer-term forecasts. Recognizing this, management might choose to devote efforts to shortening the time horizon that forecasts must cover. Essentially, this means shortening the lead time needed to respond to a forecast. This might involve building flexibility into operations to permit rapid response to changing demands for products and services, or to changing volumes in quantities demanded. Shortening the lead time required to obtain supplies, equipment, and raw materials, or the time needed to train or retrain employees, or shortening the time needed to develop new products and services. In certain situations, forecasting can be very difficult when orders have to be placed far in advance. This is the case, for example, when demand is sensitive to weather conditions, such as the arrival of spring, and there is a narrow window for demand. Orders for products or services that relate to this, example garden materials, advertising space, often have to be placed many months in advance far beyond the ability of forecasters to accurately predict weather conditions and hence the timing of demand. In such cases, there may be pressures from salespeople who want low quotas and financial people who don't want to have to deal with the cost of excess inventory to have conservative forecasts. Conversely, operations people may want more optimistic forecasts to reduce the risk of being blamed for possible shortages. Sharing forecasts or demand data throughout the supply chain can improve forecast quality in the supply chain, resulting in lower costs and shorter lead times. For example, both Hewlett-Packard and IBM require resellers to include such information in their contracts.